But in this pandemic times, it's very strange, and actually it's nice to meet you all. And we're slowly trying to get back on our feet in terms of how we do presentations, lectures, what frequency, how much online, and I'll probably canvass you all in the new year of any ideas. It's quite a difficult time. We also suffered in the building a massive electrical problem that isn't just a trip and it's a neutral fault that blew everything. So that's from fridges to all the computers to all the screen and audio visual, as you can see. It's my problem to sort out, but it's taken us quite some time in London to get it through insurance, and we can't close the blinds and that sort of thing. But you're most welcome tonight. We are, as I say, we're trying to get back on a regular footing of doing a last Thursday of the month meeting. Some of them, dare I say it, to get an Omani speaker will be done online, and we'll try and get the balance right, and I'm sure we won't suit everybody. But you're most welcome tonight, and we enjoy the social, we enjoy meeting you all. I've got to do the domestics as General Manager, so if you see me leaving in a rush with the fire alarm going off, it's through the door, straight out onto the street. Follow, please, or through the kitchen, but don't go out through to the courtyard, otherwise you'll be stuck down there and I'm probably not coming back for you. But it'll be straight out the back door. Most of you will know the building, the facilities, if you like, just outside or downstairs into the main offices. We're a little bit thin on the ground tonight, but I'm really grateful that you come. It helps us a lot. It invigorates us as the executive staff, if you like, to meet you all and to swap those stories. And I'm determined over the next year to try and capture some of your experiences and make sure we record it, if you like, in the society, because I think we can be a repository of those happy memories that we've all got of Oman, and that's something really in common, that we all have enjoyed our time there. But enough of me. I just want to introduce Jeremy Jones, who you'll all know, and he will take you on to Ciarán. Jeremy, please.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce Ciarán to you. He has an incredibly interesting background. Became a special advisor in the Irish government at a very young age, barely out of college, and served as a special advisor, if I recall correctly, in the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Justice, and in a broad ministry that dealt with energy, communications, and technology?
Natural resources.
Natural resources. And I remember that his minister, Dermot Ahern, paid a particular tribute to him in relation to establishing an all-Ireland energy policy, which was a very important practical component in the Irish peace process. So this is someone who has really known the nitty-gritty of peacemaking. And then alongside that, in the 2008 financial crisis, he had the truly horrific experience of receiving a call from the Ministry of Finance to be told that he had to lose 40% of his budget overnight. This is a tough ask of any official. So in 2013, Ciarán joined the Middle East Desalination Research Centre as Director and Head of Mission. And the Middle East Desalination Research Centre is an international NGO based in Muscat, established in 1996 as an outgrowth of the Madrid peace process, which followed the Kuwait War in 1991, initiated by the first Bush, George H.W. Bush. That led to what was called a multilateral phase, and working groups were established in several fields, essentially as a confidence-building process. So this was separate from, but in parallel with the Oslo Accords, which were reached, if I remember correctly, in September 1993. So Oman decided to host the first meeting of what was the Water Working Group. And that meeting was held in Muscat in 1994. I remember hearing about the Israelis setting up their satellite dish on the balcony of one of their rooms in the Intercon, if some of you will be familiar with the Intercon on Shati. Anyway, so the Israelis were there for the first time, and the members of MEDRC include the United States, Japan, South Korea, Israel, Oman, the Palestinian Authority, and the various European countries. And clearly, an organisation with that membership, whoever leads it is, in some sense, if they're not riding a tiger, they're riding what, if I remember the children's story correctly, possibly riding a push-me-pull-you. It's not a straightforward job at all. So I'd like to offer Ciarán the very warmest welcome. Please. Thank
you very much. It's lovely to be here and lovely to have such a lovely audience. So I'll just tell you the story of MEDRC and what we do. I'll go through this quite quickly. I'll stutter and splutter through it, and then you can ask me questions and we'll get down to the detail. So our story begins in Muscat in Oman. And to understand Omani foreign policy, I mean, Omani, you know, this audience knows better than most, but it's built on consensus, quiet diplomacy. It's not the European rational zero-sum game, one nation wins, one nation loses. It's about building a system of mutual trust. It's based on generosity and having a long-term deal with your neighbours and everybody around you. The way to understand it, a lot of academics have looked at Omani foreign policy and gone, there's something there, we don't know what it is, there's some ghost in the machine, some genie in the bottle, what is it? And they've talked about Ibadi jurisprudence. They've talked about the relationship between the imams and the tribes. They've talked about the fact that Oman was, a 1,000-year seafaring people that would have met with a lot of other cultures. And they talk about Oman's strategic position. This very scary geography, but very powerful geography as well. I think to understand Omani foreign policy, you need to understand the Falaj system. And they're the product of the same culture. They're the product of the same history. This idea, in a country where water is life, you don't have water for 24 hours, you die. And they've created this 2,000-year-old system based on whole jurisprudence around it, of how do you share this based on trust? How do you have joint solutions, joint approaches to this, joint problem-fixing solutions? That's why the Falaj thing here, to understand Omani foreign policy, why it's not just we want to make a win today, why we actually want a broad structure where we're all winners, where we're very, very generous today, and you'll see this. Once you understand this, you'll understand Oman since the 1970s, 80s and 90s and what she has done in the world. In the early 1990s, as Jeremy said, the Omani system, this remarkable system, comes up against this big lumbering European type initiative called the Madrid process after the Kuwaiti War. The world is a bit giddy after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We can fix anything. So the world looks at the Holy Land and says, okay, we're going to have a go at this. We're going to have a go at fixing this. And they set up this big multilateral system. Bush is there, the Russians are there. Uniquely for the first time ever, the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel are there. So the world is confident and they get going. Now, as we all know, it failed. Okay? But one thing is very important. One little thing Oman did still survives. And I just think for foreign affairs and international relations practitioner, there's something small there, some little lesson to the future for everybody. So the history of the organisation is 1991, the Madrid conference, as Jeremy has said, multilateral track in Moscow, and then you break it up into working groups. And the water working group is the one that Oman was on. Okay? as far from talking to the people behaviourally, as it's always, in diplomatic history, when you think of what's on the paper and what's off the paper is very, very important. The rest of this entire structure was based on very, very formal meetings, but the Omani approach was no. Just like the Falaj system. Let's find some way to keep meeting. And there were times when we will fall out. There are times when we won't agree. There are times when we'll walk away from the table, but we'll have something that's still there. So Oman hosts this initiative called the Middle East Desalination Research Centre. I know nothing about desalination. Nothing about desalination. Desalination was a raison d'etre. It was the reason to bring people together. Okay? My board, the executive council of this Desalination Research Centre, are diplomats and water specialists as well. But it's an excuse for people to meet and do some good in water, because the region does need cooperation in water. The region does need to boost its own capacity in water. All of water, and in this week of the meetings in Glasgow, water in the Middle East today is a function of energy. It's a function of climate change. All water, essentially, in the Middle East now, apart from the very south of Oman where it rains a lot, is a function of desalination. Hugely energy using, hugely wasteful, hugely pollution. So to be able to improve the energy and all of this is a very, very good thing, in addition to the peace stuff. The organisation is structured by an international agreement, okay? So it's an international organisation. Only states are allowed to be members, okay? The Sultanate of Oman recognises the organisation as an embassy, okay? So I'm a head of mission, I'm an ambassador in Oman. When you come into MEDRC, you leave Oman, okay? So any negotiations or discussions in MEDRC are not held in the Sultanate, they're held in MEDRC by agreement. We're on the diplomatic lists and all of that sort of, the police can't come in. And this is really unique in international peace building to have this sort of organisation. The mandates of the organisation are set out in an agreement, and Jeremy was involved in this, and other friends and colleagues have been involved in setting this up back in the 1990s. Our mandates are frozen in the permafrost, like any international organisation. We have to help the Middle East peace process. We will do nothing that doesn't help the Middle East peace process. If anyone asks us to do something that undermines the process, we won't do it. Can't do it. It's our core operating system. And the second part is to find solutions to freshwater scarcity, okay? And that's what MEDRC looks like. That's what they built, okay? And His Majesty Sultan Qaboos, the late Sultan, gave the land for this and the money to build this. And it's a wonderful, wonderful building, where all our staff are now today. And it's a water research centre. The problem was, of course, though, that Madrid failed. The outflow from Madrid, Oslo, it failed, okay? And it failed the Palestinians more than anybody else. I mean, I think there's a general consensus on that. And everything died. And today, it's all dead. 30 years later, this month, 30 years ago, Madrid started, and now everything is dead, apart from this. But by 2009, 2010, we had intifadas, and we had non-cooperation. The Oslo thing was totally dead. MEDRC was still alive, and the Omani attitude was, keep it there. Because in the long term, you don't kill off anything. So you keep it there, and in time something good will emerge. And that's when I came on board. And with the support of all of the governments, we destroyed the organisation. We started all over again. New strategy, new approach. And we looked at organisations and approaches to water and peace, diplomatic approaches to water and peace, and people who want to build a peace process and say, the diplomatic track isn't working at the moment. Let's try and use the environmental track. Let's try and use these other ways to get people in the room. And most of those fail. Okay, so we had to go and look at these. I'll just talk through these really quickly. The reason these initiatives work, and you hear about water wars and water for peace and climate for peace, the rational reality gap means this is what looks really, really nice in the European headquarters, in the European office, really has a totally separate impact on the ground. White middle-aged people in European headquarters deciding, oh, let's do this in some conflict. Well, really that's no way to do your business. It doesn't work. Never has worked, never will work. The solution looking for a problem. A lot of this area is full of generally middle-aged men that look like me, run around the world doing their Indiana Jones thing, trying to bring peace around the world. It doesn't work. It's never worked. It doesn't work, okay? Third one, transboundary cooperation doesn't equal peace. Just because people cooperate over a border, that can be used to embed colonialism, to embed dependency, to embed injustice. The South African government cooperated on water with Bantustans. it didn't mean it was a very good thing. So you will hear people talking about water for peace and 2 hydrologists met from different countries and wasn't that magnificent? It has no meaning whatsoever. In Ireland we had water organisations before, during and after the peace process. It had no impact or relevance whatsoever to the peace process. You can create small islands of cooperation, but they have no peace process impact. Government is the operating system. If you want to engage in a peace process, you have to engage in a government and diplomats. Everything else, it's marginally good and you need to have people meeting people and all of that. But really a proper peace process is a document that governments agree. Ignoring politics is political. This is the most important rule of engagement diplomatically in this sort of sector. If you say to a group of people involved in a conflict, let's leave politics at the door, you're saying, I accept the status quo. That attitude helps the dominant power. It helps the dominant party because you're saying, what's going on outside this room is absolutely fine. It doesn't work. You have to create a political construct that lets people meet. The academy is not society. People with PhDs who are specialists in climate or specialists, they don't take up Kalashnikovs and kill each other generally. Just because they cooperate, it's lovely and it's magnificent and it's great, but actually it probably won't lead to much peace. You'll get an island of cooperation, but probably not peace. And the last one, in this entire area, there is what you call an agency lacuna and a lack of multilateralism. There's nobody whose full-time job it is to do this. Okay? And that led us really to look at what are the models around the world to do this. So what we did is, Madrid had died off, but we maintained the multilateralism. And the Omani approach and the Omani attitude was, we have a really interesting model here. We found a way to get the core parties in conflict, Israel and Palestine, to sit together long term. But the process around it has collapsed. What can we do to reinvigorate this? And from the Irish peace process, there is an approach which is very, very similar to the Omani approach. And this wonderful peace process that the United Kingdom and Ireland engaged in for 30, 40, 50 years. And this idea, which comes from the Opsal Commission back in the 1980s, but just captured what was there, the idea of parity of esteem, which means that I don't have to believe what you say, but I have to accept that you believe it, and by virtue of your humanity and your people, you have a right to sit at the table, you have a right to be heard. So it's not a negotiation outcome, it's by virtue of your humanity. That's the first thing. The second thing is the concept of the joint guarantors. Okay? There's a movement in the Irish peace process. In the 1980s, the Irish government was the spokesman for the nationalists. In the Anglo-Irish Agreement, the Irish government represented the nationalists. By time, the major government here was a very enlightened government, the major Conservative government, then Blair's first term as well. This moved with the Good Friday Agreement that the two governments became joint guarantors of the entire process. So the Irish government and the British government actually were the two adults in the room, and they looked after everything and made sure the system was in balance. So the Irish government would, look after unionists as much as national their interests in terms of structures, is what I mean. So what we did is we took this process and brought it back into linked it with the Omani system and the sort. In addition to bring this together, we decided to have an additional mandate beyond peace and waters to develop the organisation as a model organisation for states seeking to use transboundary environmental issues. For us in the Middle East, it's water, but it could be climate change, desertification, any of these things in the service of a peace process. What a mandate like that does to you is it focuses your whole job on what you should do. Does this work as part of the mandate? And then we developed a model. Okay. The slides I'm going to show you now are the slides that the Executive Council of MEDRC saw when they approved the model. Okay, so there's nothing, this is not a complete exercise in water mityism. I mean, this has been approved by 11 countries. So you take the core parties of a conflict. For us, it's Israel and Palestine. It could be any two countries that are in a conflict. You take the transboundary environmental issues. For us, it's water. It could be desertification, climate change, whatever. You take supporting states. Sometimes neighbours, sometimes countries that have an ODA budget that want to help out in terms of conflict resolution, that really want to be a part of it. And then you create this centre. Now go back and think about the filage we were talking about before, this water tube that goes through the village based on who gets what goes through it, it's jointly owned sort of thing. Well, that's what the centre is, that's what MEDRC is, okay? This core Omani idea merged with the Irish peace process. And the centre is a co-equal partnership. Everyone who's a member is an absolute equal. It has a diplomatic structure, it gives you status, people can't bully you, you have independence, okay? We only work with government officials, we work with the human being in the civil service who has the water file or the peace process file. We don't work with civil society, we don't work with NGOs, we don't work with academics. We work with government, and only government, because government going back, is the operating system of the peace process. We have a clear mandate, and we build this resilient conduit for cooperation. And again, with the Omani approach, it's long-term, it's resilient. Years will pass when nothing happens, and then it happens, and we're there, okay? We just keep turning up, okay? And that's what you do. We rely on core party commitment. We demand and expect the commitment of the core parties to the conflict as co-equal partners. Everyone demands that. It's not an optional extra. And then we have a mix of bilateral and core party projects. What bilateral means is we have member countries in MEDRC who are OECD DACable. They're poor countries, they're developing countries, Palestine and Jordan. So as members of MEDRC, they're entitled to assistance from us. So we will have bilateral projects with them in water. We'll help them with desalination. I'll talk about this later. And then independence is very, very important to us. And you'll see that in our funding stream. As Jeremy said, it is like riding a tiger, and you can have pressure from one country. I'll give you this amount of money if you do this, I'll give you that amount of money. So we have hugely diverse funding streams in the organisation to guarantee independence. So if you look at this resilient conduit, the filage, what goes through it? When things are really, really bad, and there's a war, you meet once a year. That's what it is. And a very cold meeting it is, but you meet once a year because you're determined. We're meeting as equals. It's actually a political statement that you're still meeting as absolute equals, okay? Sorry. We conduct joint workshops, track 1 or 2, humanitarian. This is a humanitarian forum, or sort of back channels to deal with humanitarian issues in a war, which are needed all the time. Joint gap analysis and negotiation. Joint gap analysis when you get the parties to a conflict together and you do a joint assessment of what the issues are, what could we work together on what. So these are hypothetically which can go through the filage or the pipeline depending on the external environment, okay? And that's the model, okay? So that's lovely on paper. So what we've done then is we've taken the model, got approval from government, and then turned it into a reality. So what does MEDRC do? What do you do in this organisation? Well, on the front, when you come into the organisation, you see a dedicated research lab with focus on energy efficiency, which is hugely necessary in the Gulf. 2 fundamental technologies that you can't actually live with in the Gulf that use so much energy: desalination and air conditioning. I mean, you've industry, but life isn't actually possible really at 52 degrees in August, in July. You need these hugely energy sapping things. So we're working very, very hard. We've deep research capacity, and we're bringing people into the country all the time and to the neighbours. To try and boost, find ways to improve this. A big focus on water reuse. We have a lot of conferences and workshops to bring people into the Sultanate, into the region from outside. We localise technology, and the idea is to be a catalyst for new ideas. In terms of the water mandate, we have 2 programmes. These are commercial programmes, fully commercial programmes, and the idea is to ensure we have commercial funding. Again, there's a political reason for this. You don't want people to be able to make you do one thing or the other thing for money. You have to be reliant not on one country but on very, very many. This sort of activity ensures that we have some money. It ensures that we can afford to have full-time scientists and engineers, because ODA money won't actually pay for that. So that works very, very well, and I'll talk about them in a minute. And the third thing is our development cooperation programme, which is a full-time programme that does our peace mandate work, which I'll talk about now in a minute. And the research programme, I mean, it's very, very deep. It's very, very meaningful. It brings in a lot of money. This is Dr. Hilal Al-Hinai, the former Secretary General of the Research Council of Oman. They have supported us to do a $700,000 prize for the first research team that can build a handheld off-grid desalination unit that can be held in the hand, cost less than $25, and produce more than 3 litres of water a day. This will be a humanitarian game changer. If you can bring that technology down to that size and pre-position these things, you can imagine after a hurricane, people surrounded by water, you can just scoop the water up and make it. So we're providing $700,000 for the first team that can build this. We have 3 teams in it in the finals at the moment, and hopefully one of them will win it. It'll be a huge thing for humanity. And the only thing about getting the prize is you have to make it available for humanity. You can't go and just hide it then and go away and wait for your share price to go up. It has to be available. If it's not available in a couple of years, we get it. Okay? And these are just to show you that there is capacity there. I mean, we have all sorts of gizmos in the back garden, and we have all sorts of laboratories, and we do Omani Water Researcher Awards and all these sorts of things. The training program is very, very exciting. Oman, the Omanization strategy in Oman, which some people give out about every now and again, in the water sector, is really, really good, and it's really, really working, and the numbers are flying up. And we have a very good programme sponsored by BP, where MEDRC and 6 or 7 of the large desalination providers in Oman have a training programme to provide the full cohort of Omanis to fulfil the Omanisation of the water sector. And it's working really, really well, and a good mix of men and women involved. The education standard is really, really good, and they're as good as anywhere you get on earth. And actually a lot of them are now working outside the Sultanate as well for big wages. This is the launch of our training programme. His Excellency Said Badr opened our training centre, which we built because it was so successful in the centre. The development cooperation programme has 2 elements. This is now the meat and veg of what we do. And my colleague Kirsten Winterman over here actually leads this. We do 2 types of programme. One is a bilateral programme in Jordan and Palestine. These are funded by the German government, the Dutch government, the Qatari government have funded it in the past, and the Swedes. And we do a lot of help for Palestine. About 100 research projects a year in Gaza and the West Bank. PhD program, the only PhD program in Gaza we run. We do all sorts of assistance to the government. We work with the Palestinian Water Authority all the time, and the Foreign Ministry. It goes really, really well. It works. We're part of the furniture there, and they're good colleagues, and all goes well. This is just 1 year's worth of development cooperation projects. I don't expect you to read it. What I'm trying to say is it's a lot, and it works very well, and then the standard of student is great, and the outcomes are fantastic. The Trilateral programme is the only one on earth. It's the only place that the states of Israel, Palestine and Jordan cooperate on. Nowhere else in the world does this happen. I chair, with some of my colleagues, a meeting once a year at the Dead Sea in Jordan with officials and diplomats from the 3 countries. We meet as absolute equals, because going back to the original Falaj idea, we're based on utter equality. Okay, it's the only place on earth they meet and work as absolute equals. We meet as equals, and as 3 independent countries, chaired by MEDRC, look at the water and environmental issues affecting the 3 separate systems. We then pick 5 or 6 areas, climate change, sea level rise, all of these issues, and 5 times a year, the independent capitals then, we'll have workshops for very senior, director level or above civil servants. Back to the Irish experience, when senior civil servants have networks together and work together, when their political bosses eventually go, there will be a peace process, they're ready to go and move really, really fast. At the height of the peace process in Ireland, an Irish official could pick up the phone to a British official and go, I have a parliamentary question on that, what was your last note like? And this sort of swapping goes on. And that's what you want to do. It is highly naive for me to say that today that works. The situation is absolutely appalling. But there's no government on earth that has managed to do this. There are governments spending 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 times more than us and can't achieve this, okay? Because it's based on equality. And the message is really, there are mechanisms that can work, okay? If you base it on equality and this Omani approach of no short-term gains, just be there and keep turning. This is a very, so that's, we do all sorts of trilateral policy briefs. This is some of the feedback from the governments where the academic community can't write. Could we please give them 2- and 3-page briefs based on what the academic community are doing? So this is one of the things we do. But this works very well. And this is sort of the boring work of sitting across from each other at tables and going through these issues line by line. But it works. The last slide I have is what they call the MEDRC stability mechanism. Part of creating a model, the idea of a model is that someone working on a peace process in Korea and Africa and wherever will go, the formal channel is broken down, we need to start finding ways to build confidence using the environment. Where is the mechanism? So the German government, the Auswärtiges in Berlin, have funded us to do a 3-year research programme. I think the value is about €1 million, to capture what MEDRC does and to look at other parts of the world it would be useful in. Ourselves and the Germans did our first, we tendered an international consultancy to have a look, just a starting report, and they came back and said, yes, the model is highly unique, nobody else on earth is doing it, and here are the immediate places they think it would be useful at the moment. I'm not going to Helmand River in Afghanistan. The point is, this is an independent validation from people outside who are water and peace experts who've never heard of the organisation, and they go, yes, it works, nobody else is doing it, and immediately you go there. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we are setting up a working group with governments to find 4 or 5 areas we can go and talk to people. So that's what I do. That's what we do. It's one of Oman's gifts, I think, to the world. Again, we are low-key. Again, we are long-term, highly resilient, and I hope you can see the echoes of the Omani cultural approach mixed with the wonderful job that the British and Irish governments did together for 20 or 30 years in the north of Ireland, and this multilateral Madrid approach, how it all comes together in this very unique organisation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ciarán. If I may offer a first question to kick things off. Plainly, the environment for Middle East peace today in 2021 is sadly very different to what it was in the 1990s when MEDRC was established. To be candid, the environment today is far more negative, and there's been, I would say, a very significant shift in world opinion that is not in Israel's favour. And given that, how do you manage your relationship with Israel?
Well, we've pretty good relations with Israel because we're very respectful of our attitude to this is we're based on equality, and equality is for everybody. It's just being nice to everybody. So we don't treat anybody different to anybody. We're always there, we're always respectful, we respect people's security, we're very professional with people. So that's fine, that works very well. And the same with Palestinians, and different systems have different capacities, different systems have different level of civil service capacity, and you have to bear all that in. Look, I mean, all of our staff are told quite clearly, quite formally, that in the course of your work, if you ever think that there's anything you're doing or being asked to do that is a breach of international law, that's aiding or abetting an occupation, that's aiding or abetting the suppression of the people, that's hurting the security, of an Israeli, for example, or Palestinian or whatever, you don't do it. You listen to the voice in your head and you don't do it, and nothing will happen. There's no HR thing. This is not a HR thing. It's just, you don't do that. Okay, so that's how we work, and we're very open about that, and we tell everybody that. So that's how we work. So the relationship is okay. I mean, we've had good and bad relations with everybody. As anybody who's ever worked in a diplomatic, there will be the country you are closest to, and there will be a horrible person in the post you're dealing with. That's not a reflection of the relations that are there. And that's happened on all sides. Happens a lot on all sides. But you just turn up and you just keep at it, and you just say to people very open, if you try that again, you will face a brick wall, and a brick wall, and a brick wall, and a brick wall, because this is the line. At the end of the day, our success is that we're weak. And you say to people, we don't have deep pockets, we don't have deep anything. So if you want to kill it, you can kill it. But there's a mutually assured destruction there, and nobody's trying to kill it. So I'm trying to evade your question. I'm open about that. But look, it's an honest effort to be nice and decent with everybody, and ultimately, it's all you can do. And we're not a nation state. We don't come with power. We don't come with money. We're just there, and we're part of the furniture. And they seem to accept it.
Thank you. Opening the floor, please, behind David. Oh, it's John.
I think we would all recognise the way that you characterise Oman as trying to be friends with everybody, cooperate with everybody. What surprises me a little bit is that there didn't seem to be any of the UK in that, when you showed all the countries. Is there any involvement of Britain in this work at all, and why not?
Practically, we did have discussions with them a couple of years ago, and the funding mechanism would have come through DFID. And it's very hard to fund this activity through development cooperation. Just say I had discussions with Ireland a couple of years ago as well, and Irish Aid, very like DFID. These are huge organisations, right? So they have to have incredibly formal spending things. So, giving out blankets in a refugee camp is a very easy thing for them to do. Funding a UN organisation. This stuff is really stop-start. It's really complicated. For example, I'm a head of mission, so I have my salary, there's a car that goes with it, I have to go to embassy jollies, I have to have a house, I have to do all that. You divide that by 200 days and you go to an aid agency and they go, we're not paying that. And that's for most staff, actually. actually, because they're used to hiring staff in the European capital who work for next to nothing. It's actually quite shameful, really, but I mean, they work for next to nothing. So that sort of funding doesn't work. So with Germany, for example, we're funded through what they call a stability mechanism. In their foreign ministry, they have a peace process type area. In the Dutch government, they have similar, which have looser sort of spending things. So that dialogue sort of stopped a couple of years ago, and we haven't really gone back. There's no political reason for that. We just haven't really restarted. Funding, actually, I mean, on the peace process stuff, you can get money quite easily, but the bandwidth of actual activity is quite narrow. At the start of MEDRC, I should have said, I mean, Yusuf bin Alawi and Al Gore at the very start, who designed a lot of this, every country that joined gave $3 million. And for the first 10 or 15 years, when the politics were good, for the first 10 years, MEDRC's job was basically to deal out that money every year for research grants. That's what the was. That money ran out eventually. So, I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't talk to Britain. I mean, we'd be very proud. I mean, Britain has a long history in Holy Land, and we would be happy to engage.
Thank you. David?
I've got a whole host of questions, but I'm just interested in how it got to be in Oman in the first place, and the accreditation as an embassy. Was that a principle that was outlined in the beginning? And then my secondary question is really the staff that you have as sort of your core staff. Do you find there's sort of, over time, people try and influence by putting staff in, and you have to be careful that it's not skewed, if you see what I mean?
Yeah. We don't allow governments to have any say whatsoever in staffing. Whatsoever.
So you recruit how, if you sort of mean, across the board?
Across the board, just
right.
Ads on the internet, whatever. That was made very, very clear to me by the chairman of the organisation and everybody else. You're the CEO, you're the head of mission, it's your job. And nobody's ever done that, and nobody has ever said, here's a €3 million grant, but you have to appoint one. It's just never happened, and people know what would happen if they tried it. It would be made public very quickly.
So the principles are accepted, and that's a good principle.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Sorry, when the last time we met was in Washington DC, and I was there when the whole deep transformation of US foreign policy happened under President Trump, moving the embassy from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and sort of departing from the long tradition in US foreign policy of an even-handed approach. I'm wondering, A, what impact it had on your work in Oman, and secondly, since the Biden administration has come in, have you noticed a sea change, or has it been pretty gradual, or has it been noticeable at all?
But first of all, our core relationship is with official diplomats in the State Department, who I have to say have been magnificent. I mean, just the standard of diplomacy, the standard of diplomat, how they get the way to handle sensitive things has just been really, really outstanding. And no matter what administration is there, and just the third administration I've worked with, they've been absolutely fantastic. During the Trump years, it's no secret that the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs, I think that their budget was zeroed for peace process activity. However, with dialogue between the Omani government and the American government, MEDRC was the only thing that they funded eventually. So the system, the American system, even under Trump, said, okay, this is important, we will still fund, so they still funded it. So that's been great. With Biden, actually, what's very, very interesting with the Biden administration is there is obviously interest in the peace process and great support, and they've been tweeting about it, saying how much they support us, which is very, very welcome. But in addition, I think our model is of interest to them now with climate change. And parts of the world where actually climate change is an issue, but there's no positive in climate change. But actually the impact of climate on conflict is becoming more and more and more to the fore. So how do you actually deal with that? And water, as I said, is a function of energy, therefore as a function of climate is going to be affected by this. But how do you use this mechanism around the world? So we're having great dialogue at the moment with USAID and things like this. Unfortunately, the Americans still have the, I forget the name of the law introduced under the Trump administration, that their money can't support Palestine or Palestinians. So we have to find a way to work around that, and hopefully that will be repealed at some stage. But it's been very good.
And yes, sir.
Yes, Julian Nutt. You obviously have a very vibrant organisation. You've described the diplomatic level extremely well. Could you say a bit more about the actual water projects that you are promoting, and how, what on practical things are you proposing on the ground to introduce into the Palestine-Israeli situation, for instance? Your last slide showed other regions of the world, including the Aral Sea, which we know about now. It's quite different. But how are you using, what water projects? Could you describe the practicalities?
Yeah, the practical, we have a couple of ways of doing it. One of them is we do these about 100 applied research projects a year. We work with the Palestinian Water Authority and the Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Jordan. Okay? These governments, for many years, were hiring European consultants to do reports on, which normally would be a small MSc research project level, the water system in a hospital, how to reduce non-revenue water, its leakages in the system in a particular town or something like that. We went to them and said, no. As a government, you need to build up your own capacity to deal with these. There's no point in going to European consultants and letting the money out of the country. Tell us the sort of areas you want to look at. We will work with the universities in Palestine and in Jordan and build research projects and then get bright young people to conduct these research projects as part of an MSc project, which is supervised and has international supervision. So that's what we do. And a typical one would be reform of a water system in a hospital in Gaza. Practical impacts of renewable energy in Gaza in the there's a kilometre inside the wall which people aren't allowed to use these days. What people use? What would happen if you put solar and all that? Would it work? And the way the sun is. And
where does that water come from?
In Gaza, it's a mix. There is a pipeline from Israel. There are small desalination plants. And the plan is to build a very, very large desalination plant. The international community are working on that.
From the Mediterranean?
From the Mediterranean, yeah. The Israelis have 3 or 4 big desalination plants, and the idea would be for Palestine to have its own plant there. They have a very good centralised water strategy funded by the Austrian government, which is based on renewing all the pipes and having 4 or 5 small, medium-sized desalination plants and 1 large one. Our training program, we've trained all of the staff for that, so the staff are ready to go. If you went to Gaza 5 years ago and you were building a desalination plant, you would see 35 Turkish engineers. Today you have 1 foreign engineer and all local people building it. We have this really, really good training program. The level of education in Palestine and water is really good. The universities are really, really good. Education, like my own country, when we were impoverished, education is the way out. And education is really fast. So that's what we do. We do a lot of support then for PhD programs in water to help people. We have built small training desalination plants in Gaza and the West Bank. We have funded all manner of small research programs. In Oman, we've just finished a program on reusing desalination membranes for wastewater treatment. We bring all sorts of experts in. We do lots of training in using solar power, using energy recovery devices, anything at all to decrease the amount of energy needed to desal water. Is that okay?
I got lots more questions.
Oh yeah.
Well, there's a hand here. Yeah.
Sorry, just I'm curious about the peace process in Ireland and your parallels with what the MEDRC is doing in the Oman. You mentioned about, I got the impression that if you hit a rocky bump of the road, you put everything into, you freeze it in time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about, in terms of the current peace process in Ireland with Brexit and the protocols, we're bringing it very locally here too, obviously you live in Dublin, but I'm just curious about what's your reaction to what we say the British government and the Irish government are involved at the moment with the protocol in terms of the North and all that kind of thing. How would you handle something like that?
I have no.
You just free put
I have no man.
the
one thing I would say is just this. As I said, our whole system is based on this, and there was no government came up with this idea, but this idea of 2 governments being joint guarantors in the process, 2 governments being the mammy and daddy of this thing, okay, and saying some days you'll win, some days, but it's moving beyond. It's very Omani actually. It's moving beyond the I win, you win. It's moving and if you look at the late Sultan, His Majesty Sultan Qaboos, when he settled the borders of Oman, if you remember the generosity, you know, take more. I mean, it's no problem. But the idea is we settle this forever. I need you to be happy. I need you to walk away now, and that's settled for an eternity. Our peoples will live because we're going to live together. That's what it is. And moving towards this joint guarantor, it moved from Ireland looking after the Catholics and the United Kingdom, it moved to joint guarantor. My worry would be that Britain is moving from the guarantor idea. And that's very, 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 very dangerous. Because the north of Ireland, it moves fast and faster, and before we know it, we're back up. So the only thing I would say is the British and Irish civil services worked amazingly well together, still work very amazingly well together. That joint guarantor thing is the only way to do this, because we don't know what the future looks like. But the only thing that's important is people don't kill people. And young kids from Britain on the streets of Belfast getting killed, young kids, Irish kids on the street getting, that should be, haram. We can't do that. So, so this joint guarantor thing is the way to do it, and that means governments quietly saying to each other, "What does this look like? You do this, and I do that," and having that coordination. The British government seem to have moved away from that. They could snap back in 24 hours. I mean, you get back into that system. That's my only comment to make. I worry about that.
Yes, please, sir. My name's Peter Harvey. You mentioned you got some commercial funding.
Yeah.
I'm trustee of a couple of charities, and one of the big problems we have is core funding from donations. So how do you actually fund the day-to-day running of that building and the general staff, as opposed to specific projects?
Yeah, and you're right. This is a huge issue in the world. I mean, I don't know if other colleagues here know, a government would generally give you a 6% overhead or an 8% overhead.
So if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. And then governments on this side will go, we're very interested in governance, and we're passing these new laws that you have to have an auditor, you have to have not only an accountant, you have to have another accountant to sign off on the first accountant. And this is really as expensive as private sector governance, but you don't get money for it. And I think the European Union guidelines for it needs to be 12%. It really needs to be. So in my country, for example, charities, a lot of their collections are just to provide for this overhead bit at this stage. This is something I'm passionate about. As anyone who runs one of these charities or non-profit international organisations would be. So we're very, very lucky. I mean, the late Sultan gave us the building, so there's no rent. Now, but we're on the sea. We're on the Cornetian Sea. There's the sea, the water, the salt in the water. It just eats the building. So there's a lot of money to be spent on keeping that going. So we're very lucky. And the United States government, the money we receive from the US, from Japan and Korea is relatively unrestricted. So we can use that for a lot of the day-to-day activities.
Is that like an annual contribution you get from all the countries?
Yeah, but it's not like a UN organisation where it's a percentage of GNP or GDP. It's absolutely voluntary, and we can't expect. So we insist on a 17.5% overhead rate. We won't work with people if they don't do that, and some people can and some people can't. And then what we do is we'll try and supplement this money from the commercial activity. That's so important to ensure that somebody can't go, I'll give you 3 million, but you have to do something anti-Palestinian, or you have to do something that will endanger the security of Israeli, so we can't do that. But it's a challenge. It's, as Jeremy knows, I mean, it's a struggle every single year. I wake up on the 1st of January and I have to bring in 3, 4, 5 million every year. That's the job.
Yeah.
You said you had a lot of questions. Go on, have another go.
Thank you very much. Could you, in relation to reduction of CO2 around the world, which we don't know what the results of COP is going to be, but are you involved at all in moving from fuel burning power for desalination to solar or other things?
Every desalination plant we have in MEDRC is solar powered, and all of our training is based around mainstreaming that. Okay, there's a little yellow box on the desalination plant called an energy recovery device, which takes the pressure from desalination, pumps water to 60 bar, 60 times atmospheric pressure, and it recovers about 20 or 30% of that, put it back down. We're mainstreaming that into the Gulf, into GCC. We've done a lot of research down here and funded a lot of research on mainstreaming solar. I mean, solar desalination is really easy because what happens is you don't need batteries. You can just have the solar panel and the desalination thing. When the sun comes up, click, it starts going, the water goes into a tank, the sun goes down, click, it stops. Okay? That's not particularly efficient. You want your plant going 24 hours a day, you want the sun to feed batteries, but it's a way of doing it. Oman is doing quite exciting things now in solar powered hydrogen and moving towards that, and I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in the Sultanate in this whole area. So I'm quite confident with this technology that works and can work. One very interesting thing about Oman, we did a seminar a couple of years ago about reducing the environmental impact of desalination and ways of doing it. And we looked at the Korean and the Omani experience. The Koreans spend billions on every stage of desalination and research and development to minimise the energy. The Omanis do it through tendering. They just change the tender process, and they're very, very good at it. They're really good. A country that has a proper tender board and can change the tender process, it's actually just great lessons from Oman for other governments in how to do it. Is there a lot more to be done? Absolutely. But the CO2 thing, you're right, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And we have these two technologies, desalination and air conditioning. We really have to start using solar.
Yes.
David?
Sorry. Just one last one from me on the. I mean, obviously you do a lot of research, and I'm not saying there's political pressure, but you obviously have to allocate that. I mean, it's not all done in Oman. It's probably universities, but is there a lot of lobbying to get that done in that country?
No. We do all of the research, and the commercial projects are all done in Oman.
Okay.
And a little bit of neighbourhood stuff and training. We will have people coming in to do training in Oman. We bring people from Gaza and from the West Bank and from Jordan to Muscat to train in desalination, because we have a plant. We have a big desalination plant that we can simulate breakages. So what happens is, in Gaza, for example, you can't just shut down a plant for training on it because it's needed 24 hours a day. But we have a big plant, and we can do the theory with somebody over 2 days, and then we'll say, go in there, the plant is broken, fix it. And they'll take out the membranes and go through this whole thing and do it,
Thank you. At the back.
Did I hear solar power put together with hydrogen?
This is a project in Oman that we're not involved in, but yeah.
Yeah,
It is happening.
Yeah. And I mean, the Irish government are very excited about this as well. If you have an offshore turbine, and there's obvious stuff you can do, and especially if you can retrofit your gas network to have percentages of hydrogen, it's really tricky. And if it goes wrong, it's a big boom.
I'm back to the. Forget about taking the salt out of the water. I'm back to the dirty politics again. I'm just curious what you said. MEDRC sits kind of below the radar in a sense, with all these various governments involved, including Israel and Palestine. But presumably there are agents or elements within those governments who basically probably don't like what's going on. Do you ever come under pressure that you're going to be hauled below the waterline? Excuse the expression. Or is there pressure coming in from outside to say,
no,
let's get rid of that crowd?
No, I tell you the way, and you know this from working in Ireland. I mean, the Irish system is a small system. It's very hard that because you're a small system, so you don't have trillions and billions to spend on cryptographers and spies and all this stuff. You operate in the open, and that's what we do. We operate in the open. We don't talk about the political stuff, but we're there. I mean, if someone wants to hack into our systems, fine. They'll find stuff about solar power desalination, fine. Knock yourself out. They'll find out that we have. So there's nothing we do with Palestine that Israel doesn't know about. There's nothing to do with Israel that Palestine doesn't know about. Everything we do is joint, and it's funded by a government that can audit us and come in there. So that's all fine. It's all.
But would there not be pressure coming out from elements in Israel to say, get those people out of that organisation? No.
No. It's never happened. Because don't forget, there's an executive council of all the countries. So I go to them twice a year and I say, we did this. We're going to do this. This is for information. It's not asking permission. Here's the projects we're doing in the next 6 months. And I'll report back if somebody stopped us doing them. And that's a great cure for anyone who tries to do that. It's never happened.
Please.
My name is Aini. Hi. I had a question regarding peace building. Is there an interest from your side maybe getting involved in Yemen in the future and with a similar model maybe? even though it's not two different states, but the two conflicting parties are obviously united in terms of water issues there, and it came up in the National Dialogue Conference previously. So.
Water in Yemen is one of the greatest tragedies facing humanity. It shames us all what's happening in Yemen. And I mean, Oman has done a great job being there, but also a lot of stuff happening below the radar. But very constructive role Oman has had in the middle of that. Really amazing to have, you can't imagine. An international organisation is only permitted to do what's in its mandate. Okay? Our mandate is the Middle East peace process. We can't do that. Our model, our assistance, our help, anything that they want, they can get. But I mean, we have great dialogue with the Red Cross in Oman. The head of mission comes and visits us quite a lot, and anything we can do, we will. But I think it's a much bigger issue than us, for example. I mean, it's just not our mandate. We're not allowed, go and do these sort of things. But you're dead right. I mean, the water issue in Yemen is beyond imagination. It's beyond imagination. It's horrific. We don't hear about it in the news as much as we used to, which is really, really horrific. I mean, obviously, there's anything we can do as human beings. We said this to the Red Cross. If anyone needs training on water things, just come. We'll do it at cost. No problem, no issue. But it's okay.
Yeah. We have time for just one more question. Who'd like to avail themselves? Please.
Can I just ask a practical question? You were talking about desalination at the time. Is there what happens to the salt? Is there a waste issue?
Yeah, well, it depends when you do it. I mean, if it goes into the sea, it's okay. You have a hydrological cycle, okay? So the water will eventually end up back in the sea. So, in time it'll all dilute back to normal. The problem is when you have a lot of desalination plants throwing salty water into the sea in a small area where there's not a lot of tides, it can kill a lot of life around, right? So there's two issues there. The first thing is you have to find ways of making sure the water goes a long way out so it's dispersed, and then it's fine. A lot of studies say it's grand, there's no big problems. But if you have 5 or 6 plants in a small area, for example in the Red Sea, down at Aqaba, if you have a lot of plants there's not a lot of movement there, so the salt can just stay there. The Arabian Gulf, it's fine. I mean, there's no
So you would see it as a sustainable method of providing water?
Desalination isn't sustainable. Just to be clear here, it uses a hell of a lot of carbon and then injects a hell of a lot of salt into it. But the same as air conditioning, without the salt obviously, same as air conditioning, none of these things, I put it this way, it's a very simple thing I looked at. If you look at the IEA energy statistics, and this is from 2014, your average Chinese person uses half a ton of oil or equivalent to sustain their life every year. Obviously someone in Shanghai has many multiples of that, but the average human being in China, half a ton of oil or equivalent. The average Indian, 1 ton of oil or equivalent. You and I are 4, and an American is 8. Right? So, yes, all of this stuff is not sustainable. None of it is sustainable, so we just have to be very clear on that. So I'm not an apologist for desalination, but if we took 96% of the water away from the Gulf, which ending desalination means everybody dies. You cannot live in the Gulf today without desalination. So it's a huge issue to try and find ways of minimising the environmental impact.
How much of it is generated by burning fuel, and how much of it is solar in the Gulf region?
I would be surprised if 10% of it was renewable. 5%. I would be surprised if 5 or 10% was renewable.
It's cheap oil.
It's cheap oil.
Yeah.
It's moving quickly, and I think what's happening in Glasgow will help. And I think once the law is behind it, it will help. But, and a lot of it then is just capacity. I mean, with the best will in the world, how do I go from oil to solar to wind to renewable? How do I do that? There's a big capacity issue there, and governments have been stung in the past by corporations coming in and making lots of promises, and the grids have to be changed. It's not simple, In Ireland, we always got this great lecture from people. Look at the Danes; they have lots and lots of wind. The Danish energy grid is linked to Scandinavia with lots and lots of base load. So what happens when you have renewables on your system? When the wind stops, you need to find electricity very, very quick. So you have what they call base load. So you have to have gas or coal in the background ready to kick in as soon as you can. The Danes have an infinite amount of hydropower in Scandinavia they can take down. And when they create too much energy, they can feed it down into Hamburg in Germany. That's all on the line. In Ireland, we're a tiny little island. not particularly interconnected. We 500 megawatts with Britain, we're going to have 500 with France, I think. So what happens with our energy grid is when the wind stops, we need to get lots of gas quick, within a second, to be ready to come up. And that's an issue in the Gulf. The grids aren't particularly interconnected, they're working on it. So how do you provide that base load?
Ciarán, thank you very, very much. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for being so nice. Thank you.